Okay, very good. Welcome back. Everyone have a seat. Welcome back, members of the jury. I do know that one of you has got a special event this evening, so I promise you we will break before 5. Okay? Not to worry. All right, very good. State, do you wish to call a witness at this time?
Yes, Your Honor. The state of Florida calls Dr. Tonia Werner.
Okay.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Right here.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Would you please state your name?
My name is Tonia, Tonia Werner, Werner.
Ma'am, how are you employed?
I am employed at Meridian Healthcare in Gainesville, Florida. It's a community mental health care center.
Okay. And what do you do there? What is your position there?
I am Vice President and Chief Medical Officer.
All right. Can you tell the jurors your educational background?
Yes, so I graduated from the University of South Florida with a degree in chemistry. I then graduated from American University of the Caribbean with a medical degree. I did my psychiatry residency at Connecticut Valley Hospital in Connecticut under the auspices of Yale University. That was 4 years of training in general psychiatry. I then came to Florida and did a 1-year fellowship in forensic psychiatry at the University of Florida.
And can you, from that point, take us forward through your work history?
Yes. So at that point, I was asked to stay on faculty at the University of Florida, and I remained there for 18 years on faculty at UF until I retired from there in 2015. And at that point, I was the vice chairman of the Department of Psychiatry, the chief of the Division of Forensic Psychiatry, and the head of the Forensic Institute at the University of Florida. The next day, I went to work as the vice president and chief medical officer at Meridian Healthcare, and we provide primary care services, mental health services, and substance abuse services for North Central Florida, mainly for individuals who are underinsured or uninsured.
And would that be considered primarily a clinical practice?
Yes.
Okay. And do you also, since you have experience in forensic psychiatry, do you also do consultations in the forensic area?
I do.
All right. And doctor, do you hold any board certifications?
Yes, I'm board certified in general psychiatry and in forensic psychiatry through the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology.
And can you just explain, if you could, to the jurors the process to obtain your board certification?
Yes. So in the past, we had to do a written examination and then an oral examination for the general boards. And then the forensics boards was just a written examination. Now it's changed, and I think we have to do, every 3 years, we have to do update and do some testing, read some general articles and do some testing. And you can opt into that program and do some peer reviews and have peers review some of your work, send them some of your notes and things like that. Or you can still do the test every 10 years to maintain your certification.
Are you licensed to practice medicine here in the state of Florida?
Yes, sir, I am. I have been licensed in the state of Florida since 1998.
Prior to working here in Florida, did you work or do forensic evaluations in another state?
I did. I started my forensic work in 1996 in the state of Connecticut while I was at Yale University.
Are you a member of any organizations or societies that deal with forensic or general psychiatry?
Yes, I'm a member of the American Psychiatric Association and the Florida Psychiatric Society. I'm a past elected president of the Florida Psychiatric Society. a member of numerous different committees for the Florida Psychiatric Society, including presently I'm the chair of the Ethics Committee for the Florida Psychiatric Society.
Can you explain to the jurors what the field of psychiatry deals with?
So psychiatry basically deals with brain diseases that affect how an individual thinks or behaves.
And the subfield of forensic psychiatry, what does that area of medicine deal with?
So that area deals with anywhere where psychiatry intersects with the law, whether that's in a criminal case such as these or in the civil arena, personal injury, contested wills, any number of areas in the civil arena.
Can you explain to the jurors the difference between psychiatry and psychology?
Yes, so a psychiatrist has completed medical school such as myself and can prescribe medications, and a psychologist has a PhD or a PsyD. They have different stipulations with regards to psychologists. But they can't prescribe medications.
Your work as a consultant in forensic psychiatry, how long have you done that here in Florida?
Since 1998.
Since 98, okay.
Yes,
Would that
sir.
be generally when you came here?
Correct.
All right. And through that part of your practice, do you consult on, well, you obviously consult on legal cases. Do you consult on both civil and criminal cases?
I do.
In criminal cases, can you tell the jurors the type of issues you deal with?
Yes, so the majority of them are probably competency to proceed. That's very common. So do they understand the court process and can they assist their attorney in going forward with their case? Do they understand their charges? I also do sanity at the time of the crime. I have done also competency to be executed. I've done those for defense and been appointed by the governor to do those.
And are you, in fact, appointed by the governor to a board of psychiatrists to perform those competency evaluations?
Correct. There's a committee or board of 3 psychiatrists appointed to do that when that happens.
Okay.
Correct.
Have you previously testified in a courtroom like this as an expert in the area of forensic psychiatry?
I have, yes,
Approximately how many times?
numerous times, probably hundreds.
Okay. And in what jurisdictions?
From Key West to the Panhandle, like all over the state of Florida, New York, all up and down the East Coast, Connecticut, all up and down the East Coast, basically.
And have you appeared on behalf of the state of Florida in a situation like this before, or been consulted with the state of Florida in a capital murder case and testified in a penalty phase proceeding?
I've worked for the prosecution and the defense in cases such as this.
All right, and that was my next question. So you have
Sorry.
worked. That's okay. You've worked on both sides of the courtroom then.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. In cases such as this, when you've been retained, in this case you were retained by the state of Florida, are you provided materials and will you seek out additional collateral materials?
Yes.
And why do you do that?
Just because to formulate an opinion, you want to have as much information as possible. If something's missing, I want to ask for that. If I see something in another expert's report that I didn't see or I didn't have access to, I'll ask for that. And I did that in this case. Mentioned some things that I saw in Dr. Eisenstein's report that I didn't see. So, inquired about those. So, yeah, you want to have all that you can have to be able to formulate your opinion.
Okay. And what would be the benefit of looking at law enforcement reports, police reports, interviews of a person that you may be evaluating?
All of that has to do with the individual's thought process, their adaptive functioning, what they're doing, how the whole process, what went into, the instant offense. I mean, that's why we're involved in the first place.
In this case, were you provided materials by the state of Florida?
Yes,
And did that include law enforcement reports dealing with the investigation, in this case from the Tampa Police Department?
yes, it did.
Did it include investigative reports from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office?
Yes, it did.
Did it include audio-video evidence of both the crime scene, areas, and places within the city of Tampa before and after the crime scene, and audio-video interviews
Yes, there were also photographs.
and photographs?
Correct.
Were you also provided with a medical examiner's report in this case?
Yes, I was.
And I believe some of the autopsy photographs.
Yes, there were autopsy photographs, correct.
Were you provided, doctor, with social media and cell phone extraction evidence?
Yes, I was.
You've already mentioned you were provided with Dr. Hyman Eisenstein's report.
Yes, that's correct.
And were you provided with a transcript of a deposition that the state of Florida took of him?
Yes, I was.
Were you provided with a transcript of the deposition of Dr. Tracy Hardig?
Yes, I was.
Have you conducted some type of evaluation of both defendants Davion Murphy and Isaiah Chance?
Yes, I did.
And did that involve you meeting with them by Zoom, I believe?
That's correct.
And is that a practice that you have done in other cases?
Yes, absolutely.
Now, by Florida statute, your evaluations of these two defendants is a prohibitive evaluation until they are convicted of capital murder, is that correct? I can rephrase.
Okay.
Are you pre-trial or before the trial starts, do you have access to interviews or evaluations of defendants?
Overruled, go ahead.
I do not.
Okay. And in this case, did your evaluations of them occur after the convictions occurred?
Yes, it did.
And is that by law?
That's correct.
Okay. So once Mr. Murphy and Mr. Chance were convicted of capital murder, first-degree premeditated murder, you were then given access to be able to conduct evaluations?
That's correct.
And when did those occur?
They occurred this past Saturday.
All right. So that would have been the day after they were convicted?
That's correct.
And did that take place throughout the day on Saturday?
Yes, it did.
So I'm going to start with your meeting with Davion Murphy.
Yes,
And
sir.
before we get to that meeting and evaluation, you have talked about some of the items you were provided. Were you provided with Dr. Eisenstein's report?
I was.
Were you provided with numerous documents and records that were provided to the state from the defense?
Yes.
And did that include educational records?
Yes.
And recently, have you been given information concerning medical records?
Yes. In
your evaluation of him on Saturday, can you tell us how long you met with him?
So I met with Mr. Murphy for approximately an hour and 20 minutes.
Okay. And what type of evaluation did you conduct?
So I did a forensic evaluation, so getting just general getting to know him, and then a mental status examination.
The forensic evaluation, what does that consist of?
So it consists again of, so initially I introduce myself, the purpose of the evaluation. I let him know that it's not confidential the way that it normally is when you meet with a psychiatrist, because we're doing it for the court. I'm going to have to take notes and that I'll be asked to testify, so that the things that we talk about are not going to be private. Make sure that he has an understanding of that. And his attorney was present at the time as well, via Zoom. And then I go through kind of his history, talk to him about his family growing up, his educational background, work history. So just get a good, feel for him, a good background on him. I do all of that, go through his medical history, his psychiatric history, substance use history, and then do a cognitive or mental status examination.
So I'm going to start with your discussions with Mr. Davion Murphy about his family and his upbringing, all right?
Yes.
Did he give you a general description of his childhood and growing up?
Yes.
What did he tell you?
So he talked about his family growing up. He loved his family very much. He described his childhood. He was Christian. He attended church. He was very God-oriented. He was very close with his family. He enjoyed his childhood.
Did you have an opportunity in the last couple of days to watch the testimony of Dr. Eisenstein and also to review the testimony of Dr. Harding?
Yes.
Okay. And you have Dr. Eisenstein's report, you said?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Did you, in your investigation of this case and your evaluation and your discussions with Mr. Murphy, did you determine if there was any history of physical or emotional abuse?
He denied that to me. I specifically asked him about physical abuse and sexual abuse. He denied that.
Can you talk to us in a little more detail about your mental status exam and exactly what you did with the defendant?
Yes. So with my mental status examination, I go through and just kind of notice their appearance, and he was dressed in orange correctional attire. His motor behavior was within normal limits. His speech was within normal limits. There was no kind of latency of response, so it didn't take him a long time to answer. When I asked him a question, you know, there wasn't a long pause between his response and my question. He was oriented to person. He was able to give me his date of birth, his age. He was oriented to the date, the day of the week, the season. He was aware that he was in the jail on Falkenberg Road, so he was oriented to where he was. He knew that Mother's Day was the following day, so he knew the upcoming holiday. So he was well oriented to what was going on and where he was at. I tested his concentration. I gave him 3 items to remember for me. He was able to register them and give them back to me right away, and after a period of distraction. So after I do all these other things I'm going to tell you about, I asked him about them again, and I had given him the words orange, tree, and flower. And at the end of all these other things I'm going to tell you about in a second, he gave me back orange, plant, and flower. So very close. You know, the middle one, instead of tree, he gave me plant, but he was very close with those. He was able to identify the current president, and then he couldn't recall Biden, but he said he was an old white dude, described him as an old white dude, quote unquote, and then knew that there was Trump and Obama and Bush again. So he was able to kind of name some presidents. He spelled the word world correctly forwards and in reverse, which is, again, a test of concentration and a test of spelling. And, you know, so he knows his alphabet. I know that was an issue and a question. Another test of concentration, I had him do serial 3 subtractions from 20. So I said, can you start at the number 20 and go backwards by taking away 3s? And he went right down, 17, 14, 11, 8, and went right down, no problem, through 6 calculations, and clearly retained the task that I had asked him to do. He did a simple calculation. I asked him if he had $20 and gas was $4 a gallon, you know, how many gallons could he buy? And he said, you know, 5 or 6. He knew the general information. I asked him, what's the function of your stomach to digest food? If you were to leave Jacksonville, which direction would you travel to go to Miami, New York, California? He got all of those correct. Who's Martin Luther King Jr., black leader who fought for freedom? And then I do abstract reasoning, so just testing their ability for abstract thought. How are a dog and a lion alike? He said animals. How are an orange and a banana alike? Fruit. A coat and a suit, clothes. a table and a chair. And that one he said, I don't know. And then he said to sit and eat on. So that one he gave me a very concrete answer and gave me kind of how they're used, as opposed to the response would be, the correct response would be furniture, is how they're alike. And then I tested abstract thought with regards to a proverb, which is what goes around comes around. And his response was karma, which is a correct response for that. So abstract thought, he was pretty good on that, other than the one response was a concrete response. And then this is when I went back after answering all of those questions and asked him, do you recall those 3 words? So after I gave him that, all those distractions and all that, went through all those, that's when he was able to pretty well recall those 3 words. So he did very well, pretty well, on the mental status examination.
And how many times have you administered that examination?
That's the same one I used in my training at Yale University back in the 1990s.
So hundreds, thousands of times?
Absolutely.
What about just conducting a mental status examination? How many times have you done that with patients in a clinical setting or people who you are examining in a forensic setting?
Oh, many, many more times than that.
Okay.
I mean, I saw patients this morning on telehealth before I left the hotel.
At Meridian?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Did you detect in that evaluation and in your entire evaluation anything to suggest that Mr. Davion Murphy has any kind of impaired brain functioning or damage?
I did not.
Have you ever dealt with patients or people in the forensic setting that do have brain damage or have suffered traumatic brain injuries?
I have, yes.
Okay, so you would know how to detect that, or is that something you're trained to do?
Yes.
Have you covered everything that you've done with him in this evaluation, or is there more?
No, that's
pretty much it?
yes, correct.
Okay. Now, in your, having conducted your mental status examination and your forensic evaluation of him and your review of the materials in this case, I want to ask you a few questions.
Yes, sir.
And specifically, you reviewed the facts of this case
Correct.
and witnessed and saw the video from the offense itself and how it was executed, the crime,
I did.
the murder.
I did.
I want to ask you, do you have an opinion as to whether the capital felony in this case was committed while the defendant was under the influence of extreme mental or emotional disturbance?
I did not see any evidence of that, no.
And do you have an opinion as to whether the capacity of the defendant to appreciate the criminality of his or her conduct, his conduct in this case, or to conform it, his conduct to the requirements of law, whether it was substantially impaired?
I did not see any evidence of that, no.
Okay. Now, did you come to any opinions about Davion Murphy's level of cognitive functioning?
Yes.
And when you arrived at that opinion, did you consider the testing that you did or the evaluation?
Yes.
Did you also consider questions that you asked him about his history? Let me ask you this, did you talk to him about his work history?
I did.
What did he tell you about his work history?
So he has held numerous jobs in numerous different places. Specifically, a lot of them were in the food industry, working at different Burger King, IHOP, different places, which required a lot of kind of fast kind of thinking and fast doing. And he was there for significant periods of time, 6 months, different significant periods of time.
Okay.
And some of them overlapped where he was working at 2 to 3 different places at a time.
Did he relate to you that at some point he had moved to Orlando from Jacksonville?
Yes, he was residing with a girlfriend in Orlando for a period of time, correct.
And did he relate to you something about the expense or cost of living there?
Correct.
And did he inform you as to maintaining multiple jobs due to the cost of living?
Yes.
And you mentioned some of the duties that he did. As far as a couple of the places he worked at, I think specifically IHOP and maybe Steak and Shake, did he advise you that he worked as a short order cook?
Yes,
And would that be a position that has a timed element to it?
yes,
Is that something you considered?
yes, absolutely.
All right. And these things that we're discussing, would those be considered adaptive functioning?
Yes,
Now, you're familiar with the DSM-5?
I am.
And do you have a copy of it with you right there?
I have a copy of the DSM-5 TR, correct?
TR. Okay, now that's the current edition, correct?
Correct.
All right. Is that a statistical manual that you utilize frequently?
Yes,
And in the DSM-5 TR, are there not recommendations when assessing, as a psychiatrist, when you're assessing for cognitive functioning or cognitive ability to look at adaptive functioning?
absolutely, it's a requirement, correct.
All right. And it specifically spells out what that is or what they're describing, correct?
Yes, it does.
In assessing his cognitive functioning, did you also look at his behavior in this case, the facts of this case?
Yes, I did. I took all of that into consideration.
Would that include his behavior and actions he took before the crime occurred as well as during the crime?
During and after, correct.
And in your investigation of this case, were you aware of the fact that the defendant was at large for approximately 7 months after the murder happened?
Overruled, go ahead.
Yes, I was aware that he was at large for 7 months,
Okay.
correct.
And was able to elude capture?
Yes,
Were you aware that the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office was actively pursuing him?
yes, I believe there were billboards and press releases, and yes, correct.
Did you take that into consideration?
I did, yes.
Would that have required an adaptive behavior?
Yes, I believe he actually commented on that, correct.
And were you aware that when he was finally arrested that he gave a approximately 2-hour interview?
Yes,
Did you review that interview?
I did.
All right. And during the interview, did you take note of statements that he made about his culpability or whether he had been involved in the case?
Yes,
In that type of a situation, if a person is misleading or lying or being disingenuous, is that something that you would consider to be important to your analysis?
yes,
And the types of lies that they were able to create, is that something that you would also consider to be significant?
yes, absolutely. If they're able to manipulate facts and kind of incorporate them into their misstatements or fabrications, that's indicative that they're able to kind of fabricate or manipulate things. So comes into their cognitive functioning.
Does the DSM-5 speak to assessing for cognitive ability as far as utilizing IQ testing or standardized testing?
Yes, it's not just based on IQ testing, and you can't just use the IQ test. They can't just use the number.
And is this an area of analysis where collateral information like these police reports and the behavior of the defendant during the commission or before the commission or after the commission of the crime, where that is a significant factor that you would look at?
I think all of that is significant because it, again, plays into their adaptive functioning and demonstrates, adaptive functioning, just like work history, all of that comes into play. Yes, you've got to take all of the information that's available to you when trying to formulate an opinion.
Have you come to an opinion, doctor, as to his level of cognitive functioning?
Yes,
And what is your opinion?
I think that he has a low average level of functioning.
When you were speaking with Mr. Murphy and conducting your mental status evaluation of him and your forensic evaluation of him, did you consider the issue of malingering or faking?
Yes, you always consider that when you're, especially when you're in the forensic setting and in the criminal arena. Absolutely.
Why is that?
Because of the stakes involved and, you know, the setting that you're in, you're always having to look for that.
I wanted to talk to you about a few things from Dr. Eisenstein's report. When considering adaptive functioning, did you take note of the Texas Functional Living Scale that Dr. Eisenstein administered?
I did.
And some of the requests and some of the testing procedures in that test?
Yes,
So first, I'll talk to you about telling time on a clock. Was that one of the items that Mr. Murphy was requested to do?
it was.
And I guess he was asked, Dr. Eisenstein had noted he was unable to tell time on a clock, reversing the hour and minutes, and had difficulty drawing the correct time on a clock. Did you find that to be significant?
Not necessarily. I mean, we don't really use analog clocks anymore. We don't really use that type of clock anymore. They're kind of phased out. And I found it to be slightly contradictive with regards to the clock that he drew on the MoCA,
Okay.
because he was fairly close on the MoCA. The small hand, he first put it on the 10 and then moved it to the 11, but the big hand was 10 minutes after. So the hands were fairly correct on the MoCA, although he wasn't scored as being correct on there, but he
Right.
actually did the time fairly correct on the MoCA.
He was supposed to represent 10 after 11, I believe.
Correct.
Did you think it was significant that the proportions of the drawing as far as the placement of the numbers was a truly significant item to his cognitive functioning?
Correct.
Under that Texas Functional Living Scale, he was also requested to do a money and calculation subscale.
Correct.
He was asked, well, he noted he was able to count change correctly, but was more inaccurate than not, and unable to provide correct change even with the dollar bills and coins placed in front of him. Did you find that to be significant?
I mean, I don't know. A lot of people don't use cash anymore. I don't know how often he uses cash and whether that's actually significant or not. But with regards to this case, not necessarily, but a lot of people don't use cash anymore. I rarely personally use it, in all honesty, because we have the debit cards and the cards now.
In the communication subscale, and I'm going to do this as a group, he was noted to have difficulty writing out a bank check and indicated he had never written one out.
He's never written one, so he would have difficulty doing that if he's never done it before.
He was asked to address an envelope correctly and indicated, or had problems doing that, apparently. Well, it says he was able to actually do that correctly.
Correct.
And then he did not know how to look up a person in a telephone book. Did you see issues with this?
Yeah, I did not, because we don't even have phone books anymore. I don't even know the last time that I saw a phone book.
The level that you have put him at or placed him at as far as cognitive functioning,
Yes, sir.
would that be consistent with this defendant at the age of 13 or 14 taking over management of a household?
It's possible, yes. Yeah, and doing the household functionings, he would be able to kind of keep that together, correct?
Okay. So if the jury has heard that he took over the household when his mother was ill and cooked for his siblings and managed cleaning and chores and tried to keep it at the same standard his mother kept it at, would that be inconsistent with your finding of cognitive level?
No.
When you met with Mr. Murphy, did he indicate to you that he was prescribed and taking medication?
Yes.
And what medications?
He said that he was taking Buspar and Remeron.
Okay. And what are those medications and what are they used to treat?
Yes, so Buspar is medication that's used for anxiety, and Remeron is an antidepressant.
Okay. And in fact, did you diagnose Mr. Murphy in your diagnosis, and I'm kind of jumping ahead here, I know you have several diagnoses, did you diagnose him with a condition called adjustment disorder?
I did.
And what is adjustment disorder?
So adjustment disorder is a disorder that individuals can have when they have a stressor and it's related to a stressor. So clearly he's got an ongoing stressor right now with regards to this significant legal case. And that can cause mood disturbance, conduct disturbance. So, but it's generally related to a stressor, whether it's relationship discord, a divorce, some problem with your children, but there's an identifiable stressor. And typically you expect the symptoms, you treat the symptoms as you would anything else. And you expect them to kind of resolve once the stressor is resolved. So he's being treated for that right now, his symptoms related to, his stressor.
And you mentioned anxiety and depression. Would those be symptoms?
Yes.
Is that something that is commonly seen in the forensic setting with individuals who are incarcerated in a jail setting?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And just simple depression or anxiety, is that something that is commonly seen with people who are incarcerated, pending charges, or in a case like this, possibly facing a sentence of death?
Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Absolutely. Facing any kind of sentence or, just being in jail in the correctional setting can be very stressful for individuals. Yes.
Now, you indicated that you did this forensic evaluation where you asked him about his history. Did you discuss with him his use of substances over his lifetime?
Yes, I did.
And what did he tell you?
So he described to me significant substance use, specifically with regards to alcohol, beginning at the age of 14, and his use became very heavy at the age of 16, and then he was daily use by the time he was 27, 28, where he said that he was actually drinking a bottle to a bottle and a half of tequila on a daily basis at that age. Marijuana, again, daily use, every day, all day, quote unquote, is what he told me. Up to 14 grams per day is what he told me, from 14 to 28. I'm sorry, from 11 years of age to 28, all day, every day. And then the other one that he used all day, every day, quote unquote, beginning 18 to 28 was ecstasy, which is a hallucinogen. And he described using 9 to 10 pills a day, double and triple stacks, he said. He used cocaine one time in 2016, but he didn't like it. It made him paranoid. And then he used some opioids several times, but didn't like those either. 3 to 4 times, he said, but he didn't care for those either.
Now, you're asking him about his substance use. Is that
Yes.
something that is significant in your analysis and your evaluation of cognitive functioning?
Yes.
Why?
Well, because all of those substances will impair can impair your cognitive ability. Certainly, if you're impaired on substances, that can cause you problems.
And he was indicating to you that he was using multiple substances when he would have been in high school.
Correct.
Have you come to any conclusions or opinions about his use of substance abuse and whether it relates to any type of disorder?
Yes, I diagnosed him with alcohol use disorder, cannabis use disorder, and hallucinogen use disorder.
Did you note in his history that there was some indications that he may have had ADHD when he was a child?
Yes, he was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, correct?
Okay. And as far as him as an adult now, have you come to any conclusions or opinions about ADHD and whether he still suffers from it?
I did not see any symptoms of ADHD at the present time.
Now, are you basing that on your contact with him on Saturday during this evaluation and on all the other information you have in this case?
All the other information that I have about him from the case, correct?
During your observations of the testimony of Dr. Eisenstein, Dr. Hardig, when you were watching a live feed of that, did you and were you able at times to see the behavior of the defendant here in the courtroom?
I have been able to see that, correct?
And did you take that into consideration?
I have taken that into consideration, correct?
Was he able, or did he appear to be consulting with his attorneys?
Yes, he would, he was attentive, paying attention. He would consult with the attorney, specifically when they come up and do the sidebars. He puts the headphones on, he listens attentively, pays attention to the sidebars. When she would come back to the table, he would chat with her, they would talk specifically. So he's paying attention, he's interacting with her. You know, and these are long days, lots of information, lots of stuff, and he's able to pay attention and interact, and so there aren't symptoms of that right now.
Okay. Were you able to come to an opinion as to ADHD?
I said that he has a history of ADHD as diagnosed as a child, but there aren't symptoms of it at the present time. But I can't negate that he was diagnosed with that by someone else as a child. I didn't see him back then.
Have you come to any other diagnosis of Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury about the other diagnosis?
I diagnosed him with antisocial personality disorder.
Okay. Can you tell the jury what that is, what the hallmarks of that disorder is?
Yeah, so antisocial personality disorder is an individual who basically shows little disregard for lawful behaviors, shows deceitfulness, lying, impulsivity, failure to plan, difficulties with aggressiveness, lack of remorse. They have to have had qualified for a diagnosis of conduct disorder as a child, which he would have because he had issues with fights and altercations as a child, truancy, stealing, theft issues as a child. So he did qualify for a diagnosis of conduct disorder as a child, so does qualify for antisocial personality disorder.
And conduct disorder as a child, is that, I don't know how to phrase this, but is that related in some way to a diagnosis of ASPD?
They can go hand in hand. It's not uncommon, correct? And same with substance abuse. So all of those kind of can go along together.
So I want to move on to defendant Isaiah Chance. Did you also, were you also provided materials in this case related to him and related to the same case file materials related to the investigation?
I was.
And did you assess all of the same information you were provided about Mr. Murphy, in this case Davion Murphy, as far as it applied to this defendant? And what I'm talking about specifically are the police reports, and all of the evidentiary type of information you were provided.
Yes.
And you indicated that you were provided with the deposition transcript of Dr. Hardig, and you've had an opportunity to watch her testimony here in court earlier this week.
Yes, I did.
And were you provided with documents and records that were provided to the state by Mr. Chance's attorney and their team?
Yes.
Did that include psychoeducational evaluations conducted in the public schools when he was a child?
Correct.
And diagnoses and testing that may have occurred?
Yes.
And you said you met with him on Saturday. Did you go through the same type of procedure as you did with Mr. Murphy?
I did.
How long was the meeting with Mr. Chance?
His was approximately 2 hours long.
Okay. And similar to Mr. Murphy, was his attorney, Mr. Petridis, present for that examination?
Yes, he was.
At some point in the latter part of the examination, did the defendant start having issues with cooperating?
He did. He put his head down on the table during my mental status examination, which I do at the very end, and became uncooperative. And then his attorney, and I was going to terminate the evaluation at that point, and his attorney spoke with him, and then he became cooperative and completed the evaluation.
So did you conduct the forensic, I guess, interview or evaluation? All right.
I did.
And did you ask him about his history as far as growing up, his educational history, other things?
Yes.
Okay. What did Mr. Chance tell you about his childhood?
Oh, he described his childhood as wonderful. He kind of glowed when he talked about it, became very sentimental. He talked about playing board games and you know, just he kind of glowed when he talked about his childhood.
Did he talk to you about supportive relatives that may have been around him when he was growing up?
Yes, absolutely, he did.
Okay. And you indicated, well, let me ask you this real quick. Did you also talk to him about his work history?
I did.
Okay. And did you also go through the mental status examination with him?
Yes, I did.
Can you walk us through that, how that went with Mr. Chance?
Yes, so again, we had some difficulty there because, again, that was where he kind of put his head down and became upset in the end. He, again, was dressed in orange correctional attire, normal motor behavior, normal speech, gave me his date of birth. And then when I got to, can you tell me the date today? I don't know. I said, well, what month is it? He said, May. What year is it? 2026. Well, what, you know, what's the date in May? I don't know. Is it the middle of May, beginning of May, end of May? I don't know. What day of the week is it? I don't know. Do you know what season it is? No. Where are you right now? Hell. And then he put his head down on the table. And so that's when we kind of, and his attorney kind of spoke to him again. And then he, you know, participated again. He told me he was in the Falkenberg facility in Hillsborough County. He said that next month was June and he had hoped to be out. We did the 3 words, orange, tree, and car. He repeated those back to me, and at the end, he said all 3 of them. He got all 3 of them correct at the end. He was able to identify the president and 4 of his predecessors. He was able to spell the word world correctly, forwards and backwards. He did the serial 3 subtractions, and he did like 3 or 4 calculations, and then he just once he got to 10, then he just went backwards, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And I said, well, what are you doing? And he said, I don't know, you know. And then, and I said, well, what was it that I asked you to do? And he said, start at 20 and count backwards by 3, which is what the actual test is. It's not calculations. They think it's the calculations, but the actual test is, it's a concentration test. And do they remember the task at hand? So it's not actually, are they getting the math right? It's, do they remember what I asked them to do at the end of all of it? So he got that right. So he did miss the calculation when I asked him about the gas and $4 a gallon, and he had $20. He said he could buy 8 gallons of gas. Then he knew that the stomach was to digest food. He got the directions correct from Jacksonville to Miami, New York, and California. He described Martin Luther King Jr. as a powerful spokesperson for civil rights, and he got the abstract reasoning, a dog and a lion. He said they were animals. The orange and banana were fruit. A coat and a suit, he said, were clothing. And then the table and chair, he said it's an item that is tangible. So again, a concrete answer. The correct answer again was furniture, but not as concrete as the other gentleman. And then when I asked him the proverb, what goes around comes around, he said karma's a bitch. So he got that correct. So he did fairly well as well on the mental status examination, although had some difficulties there because he was just grumpy at the end.
Okay. But you were able to complete the examination?
Yes.
So, in assessing his cognitive functioning, did you note his conversational style or maybe the words that he was utilizing?
I did.
And what was significant about that to you?
He has a very advanced vocabulary. He just, in the manner that he speaks, his vocabulary, I wrote down like several things that he said because his vocabulary is very advanced. And it's not, I know, I watched the testimony yesterday, and it's not a way of saying, do you know what this word means? He uses the words appropriately in conversation. So it's very advanced. When I spoke to him about his family, a sentence he used was, "My whole decorum was instilled by my granddad." I mean, that's not something that someone with borderline intellectual functioning, that's not how they talk. He said, "I don't know how to articulate it," when he was trying to find words to say something to me. When I talked to him about his childhood, when I brought up his childhood, and I said he started glowing. He said, "You're bringing up very sentimental topics for me. This is nostalgic." I mean, these are the words, and this is how he talked to me. So very advanced vocabulary, and he's using it appropriately when he's conversing with me. He described himself as an introvert. He used the word unorthodox. He said, "My charge is what I'm charged with is very unorthodox." He said, when he was talking about his rap videos online, he said, "I look at the analytical dynamic breakdown of how many views I'm getting." And, he was trying to explain the whole business of the videos and putting videos online and how you make money doing that. And he was explaining that all to me. When I asked him about his education, and I said, "How did you get along with the teachers at school?" And he said, "Well, that's difficult because there were a plethora of teachers. I had a plethora of teachers." And we talked about him and how he got along with the other kids at school. And he said, "Well, I had this mental capacity." And he said, "So I hung around with all the different kids." And he said, "But I like to hang out with the nerds because I like the differing complexity of the conversation with them." And he said at one point that he was so smart. He was sent to see a doctor at one point when he was younger. And he said, "I was so smart, but my grades didn't equate with my intellectual abilities." And he said, "I lacked interest, and when I lacked interest, I lacked performance," was the doctor's conclusion. So he didn't do as well in his grades because he wasn't interested. And that's what the doctor said.
Was there anything else about your conversations with him that stood out?
He was very pleasant, very engaging. I mean, he did very well until the end, and I think he just got really upset at the end and just kind of overwhelmed with it. It was more about, I think, his situation. And this was the day after he was convicted. I saw him at 9 o'clock in the morning, and it's very overwhelming.
In his work history, did Mr. Chance speak with you about things that he was passionate about doing or wanting to do?
Absolutely.
He had really strong interest in?
Yeah, absolutely. So he spoke a lot about his work history. He worked as a longshoreman in Jacksonville, and he loved that job. He wanted to be a merchant marine and go out on the water, but then when he started having children, he decided, to stay as the longshoreman, and he loved that job. He worked with cars and moving cars around and doing different things there in the marina area, and he loved that job and would have liked to gone back to that job. He only left that job to go kind of do travel and get into the kind of the music industry when he did that. But he reminisced, and again, he kind of lights up when he talks about that, because it just really, brought back memories from him, and yeah, he just loved that job.
That type of, I guess, behavior or desire or thought process, is that consistent with borderline intellectual functioning?
No.
And you indicated, I believe earlier, that you did receive the raw data from the testing that Dr. Hardig conducted with Mr. Chance.
I did.
You reviewed that. Dr. Harding did not prepare a report for you to review, but you did review her deposition and her testimony.
Correct.
Have you arrived at an opinion as to his level of cognitive functioning?
Yes, I think he has average level of functioning.
Now, as far as the issue of ADHD and Dr. Hardig's diagnosis of that, did you see evidence of that, or a diagnosis of that, I guess, by someone in the school system when he was a child?
Right, I think he was diagnosed with that as well. There's no evidence of it at the present time in my evaluation or in anything that I saw. But again, I note that somebody diagnosed him with that as a child, so I have that as by history.
So are you familiar with the manifestation of ADHD in an adult his age?
Yes,
And you're familiar with the way that that's going to show itself or manifest?
yes.
Did you see any of that in the defendant's behavior or in any of these records?
I didn't see it in the records or in anything that I've observed.
Going back to your review of the collateral information, in this case, the police reports, law enforcement reports, and assessing the cognitive functioning of these two defendants, and looking at their actions and behavior both before the homicide occurred, their travel here to Tampa, their behavior throughout that evening and throughout the early morning of June 23rd, 2024, the actual commission of the murder itself, and their actions after the fact. Did you take that into account in your analysis and evaluation for both of them?
I did.
Did you see anything in that evidence for either Mr. Chance or Mr. Davion Murphy to suggest that they have borderline intellectual functioning or brain damage?
I did not.
Did you see as far as intentionality and purpose and goal-driven behavior, did you see that in that evidence?
Yes.
Okay, and was that significant to you?
Yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. I'll pass the witness.
Okay, Ms. Toomey?
Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
So you spent approximately, 80 minutes with Davion Murphy?
Yes.
And that was an evaluation or interview with him that you had done over Zoom?
Correct.
So you could see him from the chest up?
That's
essentially.
correct.
And he had earphones on?
Yes.
Were you able to watch his manner of his gait, his walking, his movements?
No, he was seated at the table.
And let's just go back to your training for a moment. Did your training include the administration and analysis of psychological testing?
No, I'm not a psychologist. I'm a psychiatrist.
And how was it that you determined the IQ of Davion Murphy?
I did not determine the IQ of Davion Murphy.
Well, you had indicated that he was low average level of functioning, I think you said?
Correct?
What did you mean by that?
By his adaptive functioning and taking into account the IQ testing that he's had throughout his life.
So what does an IQ score of 72 mean?
Of what?
72.
That's borderline, it's a borderline IQ.
And where does that fit into the population?
It is, again, it's a borderline IQ.
What's an average IQ score?
Average is 100.
And how do you determine if someone has brain damage?
You can do neurological testing, you can do scans.
Did you do any of those things?
No, ma'am.
And do you think 80 minutes, an hour and 20 minutes without testing is enough to determine whether someone's brain is functioning?
I had the advantage of looking at the other testing that was already done and looking at all of the other information that I reviewed, correct. So that period of time was just my interview with them. That doesn't encompass all of the other things that I had access to.
Can you tell us how his work history was indicative of fast thinking?
Because he was working in fast food environments where you have to be fast thinking.
So Burger King, 4 to 6 months? That's
Yes, ma'am.
McDonald's?
Correct. IHOP.
IHOP is a dishwasher?
Yes, ma'am.
That you're required to have fast thinking to work as a dishwasher?
He worked there for a period of time, correct?
I don't know, did he?
That's what he told me, correct?
I don't know. Did he?
I'm saying correct, yes.
Oh, correct, okay. And then Steak and Shake,
Yes?
and you consider those to be fast thinking
Yes.
jobs? Okay. And isn't it important to figure out money calculations and how to count money, even if that's not what people are using on a daily basis today?
It can be.
You had indicated that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you no longer believe, even though Davion Murphy was diagnosed with ADHD, that he no longer suffers from that simply because while you were watching this trial, streaming online, that he was able to talk to me and discuss with me and things of that nature. He was able to concentrate, right?
It's, my opinion is not based solely on that. It's based on my years of training, expertise, and observations of everything and all of the information that I reviewed.
And the total amount of time that you spent with Davion Murphy was 1 hour and 20 minutes, correct?
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled, go ahead.
That's the amount of time that I interviewed him, but I've watched numerous different videos. I've watched his interviews with the police. I've watched hours and hours and hours of this trial.
Did you meet with him on a one-on-one setting in person at all?
No, ma'am, I met with him on Zoom as we discussed.
So are you discrediting, are you saying that Dr. Eisenstein is incorrect in his findings, even though he met with Davion Murphy in person on 7 different occasions throughout multiple months for over 20 hours?
No, ma'am, I said that I disagreed with him.
You disagree with him?
Correct, and I didn't see where he delineated the symptoms supporting a diagnosis of ADHD. I never saw that in his report nor heard him testify to that.
All right, let's talk about your mental status examination that you
Yes, ma'am.
did. Isn't it part of a mental status examination to look at their appearance and their behavior, hygiene, grooming, posture, their physical appearance?
Correct.
Were you able to determine whether or not Mr. Davion Murphy had anything wrong with his hygiene?
No.
Okay. What about his posture?
Right, he sat appropriately in the chair throughout my evaluation.
How were you able to determine whether he sat appropriately in his chair during your evaluation if you were on Zoom?
From what I could see, you can see someone sitting in a chair.
And you weren't able by Zoom to see any of his motor activities while you were questioning him, right?
He did not appear to be fidgeting, wiggling. He appeared to be sitting appropriately in the chair throughout the
Well, because you
evaluation.
saw him chest up, right?
Right, but he wasn't wiggling or jiggling. There wasn't moving around.
Do you know whether or not he's been jiggling or shaking his leg this entire time? During this entire trial?
I can't see him as I'm testifying here today because of the way that the desk is situated, so I can't testify to that.
Okay, so you can't testify as to whether or not his motor activity was anxious or something else.
Not today, I can't, no ma'am, because I can't see him because of the way that the judge's desk is set up.
And because you couldn't see him that way on Zoom either, right?
Correct, but he was not wiggling in the camera.
Well, his leg could be shaking over there, but not shaking the desk.
And asked and answered. Next question.
And you said that he knows the alphabet because he could spell the word world?
He spelled the word world correctly forwards and backwards. Also on the testing that Dr. Eisenstein did, he tested as reading on the 7.6 grade level. So you can't read at a 7.6 grade level without knowing the alphabet.
7.6 grade level.
Yes, ma'am.
And Mr. Davion Murphy is how old?
29?
So he reads at a 7.
Objection, asked and answered.
Overall, go ahead, you can answer.
That was on the testing, yes.
Let's go back to, you had indicated that the state had provided you videos, some cell phone extractions, autopsy photos, police reports. How many hours did you dedicate to reviewing the state's discovery in this case?
I have not had time to sit down and add it up.
Was it longer than you spent with my client, Davion Murphy?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Okay. And what is the percentage of work that you do for the state?
The work that I do for the state, I'm more frequently hired by the state than by the defense, but I am hired by both.
And what's the percentage breakdown?
It's probably 65-35, 65% for the state and 35% for the defense.
And I think you had indicated that you are part of the 3 psychiatrists that are on the board for the governor when it comes time to execute someone.
If there's a question, if there's a mental health question, yes, I have been appointed to that board.
Have you ever recommended, have you ever recommended that someone not be executed?
Objection, relevant.
Overruled, go ahead.
I believe that we have, yes.
How many times?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
You said we have. Who's we?
The 3-member board.
Okay, because there's 3 and you need 2, right?
No,
No?
we all write one report.
And then what happens?
It goes back to the governor.
So then who ultimately decides?
The governor.
And how long have you been sitting on that board?
Probably 20 years I've been appointed over the years.
The American University of the Caribbean School of Medicine, is
Yes,
that
ma'am.
in the U.S.?
No, it was in the United States when I went to it. Actually, I attended it. It was in Texas.
would you agree with me that the Texas Function Living Scale is a valid test to determine one's functioning abilities?
Yes, it's designed to test functioning abilities for individuals with dementia.
No, that's not true. It's not solely for dementia.
Yeah, so ask the question. Please don't argue with the witness.
It's not only for dementia, it's for other things, is it not?
But that's what it's designed for, just like the MOCA is designed for individuals with dementia. Correct.
Now, you had indicated that, correct me if I'm wrong, that Davion Murphy, you diagnosed him with adjustment disorder?
Correct.
And in order to get a diagnosis of adjustment disorder, one's development of emotional or behavioral symptoms in response to an identifiable stressor has occurred. And you've identified that stressor as him facing these charges and being incarcerated, right?
Correct.
That's the stressor. But isn't it true that that person's response to that stressor must be out of proportion to the severity of it?
Yes, but he's been diagnosed with symptoms and started on medications.
So how are you, I mean, if somebody's stressed because they're facing the death penalty, right?
Yes.
His stress is not out of the norm, correct?
Correct.
But you still consider that that he suffers from, or you've diagnosed him with adjustment disorder?
Yes, because I think it's in relation to that stressor, absolutely. It's a significant stressor, I agree.
Well, how is his behavior out of proportion to that stress?
I don't think his behavior's out of proportion to that stress. I think he has emotional, issues. I think it's in response to that stressor.
But it's not out of character.
Correct.
Right.
And if you read in the beginning of the DSM, it's not designed to be used in a cookbook fashion, so it's not designed to be used by people who aren't trained to use it. So you can't take every word like you're taking it.
Well, I mean, that's
And
what it
apply
says,
it.
though. That's what the DSM-5
Yeah, but it also
says.
says it's not designed to be used in a cookbook fashion by people who aren't trained.
I'm not claiming to be trained.
Well, that's
You are,
right.
right?
Right,
You're
and so I'm
trained.
using it,
Okay.
and not in a cookbook fashion. I believe he has
So-
adjustment disorder.
So tell me how Davion Murphy is acting out of proportion to the stress of being potentially executed by the state of Florida.
Objection, Your Honor. Asked and answered and argumentative at this point.
You can answer one more time. Go ahead.
I don't believe it's out of proportion. I think it's a significant stressor, and I think that he has symptoms in relation to that significant stressor, and he's being treated for them. And so that's the most appropriate diagnosis according to the DSM-5 TR. And again, there's a section in the beginning of the book specifically relating to forensics, and it says specifically it's not to be designed to be used in a cookbook fashion. You have to be able to apply it using experience and training.
All right, and then what was your other diagnosis, doctor?
I gave him antisocial personality disorder and then the substance use disorders.
Okay. And what is the criterion or criteria for one to meet that diagnosis?
Which diagnosis?
The antisocial personality.
Right, so he has to have 3 of the 7 criteria. disregard for lawful behaviors, deceitfulness, lying, impulsivity, aggressiveness, lack of remorse. Those are all things that are in his history. He has to have had conduct disorder, met the criteria for conduct disorder as a youth, which he did, having met over 3 of the 15 criteria for that disorder.
Was he diagnosed with conduct disorder when he was young?
No, but he met the criteria for it if you go through his history.
Okay, but he wasn't diagnosed with that.
No, but he met the criteria for it when you go through his school records and his history.
And part of this criteria is that the person has to repeatedly lie, right? Part of that is being deceitful and repeatedly being deceitful, being lying all the time.
Correct?
Conning others for personal profit, using aliases.
That can be some of them, yes.
Do you know of any times where Davion Murphy has used an alias or has conned others for profit?
No, and I don't believe that I use those as examples.
And then impulsivity is one of the criteria, right?
Correct?
Or failure to plan?
Failure to plan ahead, correct?
Failure to plan ahead. So you think that this Davion Murphy's involvement in this crime was impulsive and he failed to plan?
No, not at all. So examples that the DSM uses with regards to failure to plan ahead is with regards to like employment, where you're going to live, kind of adult behaviors and kind of planning out your life, buying a house, how you kind of live through your life and planning your life ahead. So not getting into trouble, getting through school. So those are the behaviors that it identifies as planning ahead.
But you also put a lot of time and effort in going through the state's police reports and videos and things of that nature, right?
Correct.
Right? And if someone is diagnosed with that personality, they are impulsive and they don't plan, right?
No,
one of
that's
the
not true.
criteria.
That's not true.
So that's not part of the diagnosis?
It's impulsivity and failure to plan ahead with regards to their life and not with regards to one specific crime or incident. I think you're trying to kind of narrow it down to the instant offense as opposed to his life in general.
So then his life in general has been impulsive and he's failed to plan?
Yeah, and jumping around from job to job. There are things in his life, yes, which are evident, and with regards to lawful behaviors and disrespect for lawful behaviors and getting in trouble, and yes.
Did you know that Davion's father was charged with murder and arrested, and he's incarcerated in prison for the rest of his life when Davion was just 12 years old?
Objection, relevance.
Overruled, you can answer if you know.
Correct. I believe he told me his father went to prison when he was 11, actually.
Would you consider that to be a traumatic event for a child?
It could be, yes.
It could be.
Yes.
What about the fact that his youngest brother is also incarcerated?
Judge, objection,
Would that
relevance.
also be,
Overruled, you can answer, go ahead.
would that also be traumatic?
It could be.
What about being shot in a drive-by shooting? Would that be traumatic?
Objection, facts not in evidence.
Overruled, you can answer.
Yes.
That would be a traumatic event?
And maybe, yes.
Watching or learning about your friends being shot and killed, family members being shot and killed, that would also be traumatic, right?
Yes, it can be.
And how much are you charging the state per hour?
Meridian does the billing. I believe they charge $400 an hour for my time.
And you don't have a breakdown of how much you spent on this case, or have you billed the state for your
No,
time yet?
there have been no bills sent out, correct?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Petrutis?
Morning, Doctor.
Good morning.
Talk to you about Mr. Chance.
Yes,
So you met with Mr. Chance probably, what, a little less than 2 hours, did you say?
yes, it was right about 2 hours, correct?
And about a little over an hour of that was you getting the background that you talked about, correct?
Correct.
Now, the testing, and I think you kind of talked about this, but this was not, what should not be considered IQ testing, what you did, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any training in diagnosing intellectual disability?
Yes. I don't do IQ testing, but yes, I've done.
All right. So in your opinion is, you disagree with Dr. Hardig's opinions?
Correct.
So is it fair to say that you also disagree with the opinions of the testing he had in school on the 3 separate occasions?
No, I don't disagree with the testing. I don't disagree with the testing.
My apologies, poorly worded question. You disagree with the results of the testing from school?
No, results are results. I don't disagree with results of testing.
But you disagree with Dr. Hardig's results of testing?
I disagree. I have a differing opinion than her opinion with regards to diagnosis. I don't disagree with her test results.
All right.
Results are results.
Would you agree that someone with a well below average intelligence could be able to do hands-on repetitive jobs?
Yes,
And would you agree that symptoms of ADHD could be less apparent later in life when you're not sitting in school for having to pay attention to different teachers for 6 to 8 hours?
they may be, yes.
And would you agree that the inability to hold a job for long periods of time would be a symptom of ADHD?
I'm sorry, could you ask me that again?
Sorry. Would you agree that the inability to stay at a job for a long period of time would be a symptom of ADHD, or could be at least?
It may be.
And would you agree that people with borderline intellectual disability can have jobs and obtain driver's license and things like that, simple things?
Yes.
Now, you talked about Mr. Chance becoming overwhelmed at some point during the interview.
Yes.
Was this around the time that you talked about his children to him?
Yes, he did not want to talk about his children, and I left that alone. So that was another instance. That was a separate instance. Yes, he did become very emotional talking about his children. And so I did not go into as much depth about his children as I normally would, getting their names and ages and that. I did leave that alone out of respect for him because that was yes, he became emotional about that, correct.
And I think you said this, but just to clarify, you would agree that him becoming overwhelmed had a lot to do with the recency of the verdict in this case?
Correct, it was the night before, yes.
All right. And I think you meant this more in a clinical sense of his being uncooperative. He wasn't aggressive, he just was overwhelmed.
Correct, yes, absolutely. I felt it was very emotional, yes. Yeah, it was very raw emotion, yes.
And he talked about his work history with you?
Yes, he did.
He didn't hold any job for very long. Would you agree?
He, I thought he did with the, longshoreman, hang on. I thought he did at the longshoreman, but I don't recall how long it was.
Okay. You didn't, and I think we know this, but you didn't test his math, his reading, his perceptual reasoning, correct?
Correct, except for with regards to, as I said, in the mental status examination as we went through that, correct.
Did you leave the possibility out for what we call reverse malingering, someone trying to appear smarter than they are? Could that be one of the reasons for using bigger words?
No, as I said, I think, certainly I consider all of that, but he was using the words appropriately in conversation. The way that you and I are conversing, he was using that vocabulary appropriately throughout the interview. It wasn't, it wasn't kind of interjected here and there in that manner to try to impress me or, do you know what this word means? One time he said, do you know what the word ostentatious means? And I said, yes. And he said, that's me. That's how I describe myself. I love myself. But he only did that one time. Other than that, the words were normally interspersed in his conversation. And I've seen writings from him with the same vocabulary interspersed in the writings to the court.
And you talked about his behavior during the trial, but I think you would agree that you don't know none of us know what's going on in his head during the trial, what he's thinking about, what he's not thinking about.
Correct.
All right, and you don't know, obviously, the conversations that myself or any other team are having with him during the trial, that you see us talking, you don't know what we're talking about.
Correct.
Okay. So would you agree that you can't say that he's fully paying attention, you just believe it appears that way?
Correct.
Judge, may I have a moment?
Yes. Okay, redirect.
Doctor, this is specifically as the defendant Chance. So when you conducted your interview, when you met with him at the Hillsborough County Jail through the Zoom, I mean,
Yes.
this is less than 24 hours after he has been convicted of capital murder, first-degree murder, right?
Correct.
And the jail is only providing a 3-hour window for your evaluation, is that right?
That's correct.
Same with Mr. Murphy,
That's correct.
and that's by their rules and regulations, right?
That's correct.
And by law, you don't have access to the defendant before conviction, right?
That's correct.
And
Overall, go ahead.
was, as far as you know, was this trial set to begin or resume on Monday?
That's correct.
Now, you were talking about Mr. Chance and his conversations and the vocabulary. Was this something that was occurring, him using those words and those different vocabulary words that stood out to you in the middle of conversation as he was speaking, just fluidly speaking?
Yes, that's correct. Yes, so I had to go back through my notes and take those sentences out of his interview with me because it was fluently interspersed throughout the interview.
And it looked like words that he was comfortable using?
Absolutely, they were appropriately used in the correct in his conversation. Correct.
And they were appropriate to the context in which he was using them?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, you mentioned a writing that he had written to the court, and
Yes.
you've reviewed that?
Yes, that's correct.
Do you recall him using the term hypothetical supposition
Yes,
and arbitrary inconspicuous theories,
yes,
substantiating action of surreptitious immorality?
yes,
Extrinsic information, do you remember that wording?
correct,
With no on its face corroboration?
correct,
No prima facie cooperation of corroboration?
yes,
And again, do you recall him using the term a plethora or a
Yes.
plethora,
Plethora.
of public figures?
yes,
So it wasn't just in your conversation with him, it was in a separate writing before you ever had contact with him.
correct.
Now, when you're determining intellectual ability, you're not testing like these psychologists did. You're not administering IQ testing. That's not what you did here.
Correct.
But
So
you- go
I
ahead.
utilize psychologists' IQ testing, but then do the adaptive functioning portion of it.
Okay. And you've been doing and conducting these types of evaluations for decades, right?
Correct.
and probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of people.
Yes, correct.
So you have a lot of training and experience.
Yes, sir.
And are you trained in both your residency and fellowships in psychiatry and forensic psychiatry?
That's correct.
Do you meet with patients during that time period?
Yes,
Is that what you were doing at the hospital associated with Yale University?
yes, that's correct.
And you were asked, this is for both these defendants, because you were asked by both these attorneys about observations and ADHD. You are trained and familiar with manifestations in adults who have ADHD?
Yes, sir.
And is it something that would stand out to you? You would see it?
Yes,
And you haven't seen that in these defendants? Well, I can rephrase. Have you seen it in these defendants?
I haven't noticed it in anything that I have reviewed or been able to observe, correct?
Would that also involve video and other evidence from the case itself, the investigation?
Correct.
I want to talk to you real quick about Davion Murphy's employment history. Counsel had asked you about him being a dishwasher. Do you recall that being at Cracker Barrel?
Correct,
And he worked there for approximately 8 months?
correct.
And he would have been at Burger King for about 6 months?
That's right.
Now, at International House of Pancakes and Steak and Shake, which he worked at for 6 months at Steak and Shake, do you recall that?
Yes,
At those two employments, he was working as a short order cook, correct?
correct.
Do you believe, or do you have experience being around short order cooks and the demands put on them in restaurants like that?
I've eaten in them.
Yeah.
Yes,
And would you agree there's a timed element and a time urgency?
yes.
And they have to perform tasks under a time, or basically a time limit?
I could not,
Overruled, go ahead.
I could not do that job for a significant period of time. Yeah, it's a very stressful situation. If you've been there and you've watched them and they're yelling at them and they're trying to juggle, multiple orders at a time and trying to get all of the food out at one time. I mean, we've all cooked for Thanksgiving and trying to get kind of all the food ready at one time and get it out at one time. And, that's what they're doing. They're trying to juggle multiple orders of food and get it all out at one time, not only for one table, but for multiple tables. So it's a very stressful job, yes.
You work for Meridian, correct, you said?
Correct.
And that is a corporation or a company?
It's a nonprofit.
A nonprofit, I'm
Correct.
sorry. And that nonprofit bills us, the state of Florida, for your work in this case?
Yes,
In psychiatry and clinical psychiatry, do you have to, or have you come across people who have dementia or Alzheimer's?
yes,
And you indicated that the Texas Functional Living Scale is designed in some way for that?
yeah, that was its initial function. Same with the MoCA, correct.
Now, I believe you were questioned by counsel about the planning or lack of impulsivity in the facts of this case itself.
Yes, sir.
Do you recall that?
Yes,
All right. Because that is one of the several diagnostic criteria for antisocial personality disorder.
correct.
All right. And there's a long list of those. Did you find all of those to exist in Mr. Murphy's case?
The criteria for antisocial?
Yes, ma'am.
No.
Okay. But as far as that goes, and you indicated what it's described as, that's going to managing one's life in a long-term plan?
Correct.
Okay. Now, in this case, did you see evidence of long-term planning, or at least weeks of planning? What appeared to be?
With regards to this case, yes.
the murder, yes.
Yes, absolutely.
Did you see intentional, purposeful action that occurred during the actual murder itself?
Overruled, go ahead.
Yes,
Was there anything about the homicide in this case, from what you saw, that had any indicia of impulsiveness?
No.
Does that, in your mind, eliminate or in any way erode your diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder?
No.
I have nothing else, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. May this witness be excused?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, thank you. You're
Thank
free to
you,
go.
Your Honor.
All right, approach the bench real quick. So it's about 11:45. The next witness will be appearing at 1 o'clock via Zoom. So we're going to go ahead and take our lunch recess now. So if you all can please return at 1 o'clock. And then I believe that will be the state's final witness before you rest and rebuttal, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. All right, very good. See you all back here at 1 o'clock.
All rise. All jurors are up.
Okay, very good. All right, see you all back here at 1 o'clock.